Hello and welcome to World Talks. My name is Sascha Fahrbach. On April 14th, Poland marked the 966 Baptism of Mieszko I, an event now commemorated 1,060 years later as a foundational yet deeply contested moment in the country's political and religious identity. From medieval state formation to communist reinterpretation and today's church debates, the meaning of that act has never stopped shifting. And now, to delve further into the issue, we're now joined in the studio by Philip Earl Steele, researcher in early medieval Polish history. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So let's go into history. Let's go into that moment a few years back. But tell us a little bit about why this act mattered so much. Was this an act of faith by Mieszko I? Was it political? Was it survival? Was it both? Give us a bit why that mattered so much.
The conversion of Mieszko to Christianity, his baptism into Catholicism, is very unique on its own terms. That is, Christianity had been spreading north of the old Roman Empire, north of the Limes, for centuries when it finally arrived in Northern Europe. And the process by which Christianity had been expanding was that of getting the king. Those were the instructions that missionaries and Christian kings and Christian wives had when they came into contact with non-Christian rulers, pagan rulers. And the logic was to tell the king that by accepting the Christian God, his weaponry would be more powerful and his throne would be secure and his sons would be sure to inherit the throne, this kind of thing. That is, the concepts of original sin and reward in heaven and or punishment in hell, none of this really played a role. There's almost an entire absence of eschatological thinking, that of, again, reward in the afterlife in these instructions that were given to convert kings and pagan rulers. However, in the cases of Poland's neighbors, this process whereby Christianity finally sank root took as much as a century and a half. For example, in Czechia, the first conversions, first baptisms of Czech princes, as they're called, took place in the 840s. But it wasn't until the 970s that the Czechs had their first bishopric and the institution of the church had finally sunk root. The same goes for the Swedes. They needed a century and a half of missionary work before their king finally and successfully converted to Christianity. This goes for the Danes. This goes for the whole region. And of course, in Lithuania, it's a matter of the 14th century. After a conversion in the middle of the 13th of a Lithuanian king, Mendog. In Poland, however, the process was very swift. He accepted baptism, it seems, in 966. The date is somewhat uncertain. It may have been 967 or even 968. But the first bishopric appeared then, right, in 968 in Poznan in Western Poland.
So with all of that history, curious as well, I mean, you said about that it was get the king in terms of the conversion. That seemed like a political decision in that mind. But how much did that baptism of Poland tie in with the rest of Latin Europe, the rest of European integration? Did that contribute to Poland? Is that when, let's say, Poland was, in a way, shaped and started?
In the long term, yeah, that was the effect, right, is that Poland became anchored in Western Christendom, in the Latin-speaking church. The division between Eastern Orthodoxy and Roman Catholicism happened a century after Mieszko, so that yet wasn't entirely important. But yeah, the long-term effects, all right, and this is how we measure, after all, the importance of political decisions. How long do they function and have meaning? So in that regard, many historians will say point blank, this is the most important decision in all of Polish history, right, to have accepted Roman Catholicism. Mieszko's very aims, however, were not quite as bold. He wasn't a prophet and couldn't foresee the whole trajectory of Catholicism in Polish history. But he, no doubt, as a superstitious pagan, believed that the Christian God is more powerful than the Slavic pantheon. We called these gods Światowid and Svarozhit and so forth. And I think it's clear that immediately he convinced himself he'd made the right decision. That is, a year after his conversion, he defeated in battle a German warlord who had, in fact, beaten him in 963, 3 years before the baptism. So a year after the baptism, he in turn conquers this guy, and it's easy to assume that he told himself, well, yeah, I do now have the stronger God.
Mm-hmm. Well, also, like, we're going to Roman Constantine, but let's not go so far, also in history. But looking also as the role and identity of Catholicism in Poland, let's go through these various parts of history. How much has the Church, let's say, been part of Polish identity, if at all? What does that look like today? I mean, there have been challenges. I mean, Poland disappeared for 123 years off the map, partitions. But what kind of role did the Church play, and what does it play in today's modern Poland?
Yeah, you can't subtract the Catholic Church from Polish history. That's an act of evisceration, after all. And certainly there have been other religions, very important ones in this country. There was a real flowering of Protestantism in the 16th century. In fact, there was a period when the majority in the Polish parliament, the Sejm, were Protestants. Mikołaj Rej, one of the great fathers of Polish literature from that time, and also a parliamentarian in that Protestant Sejm, was a Calvinist. Calvinism, more than Lutheranism, was the most popular denomination among the Protestants. But there's an interesting story that happened in the beginning of the 17th century, so following the Catholic Counter-Reformation, in a town called Szydłowo. It's today in Lithuania, but then it was a Polish town, and there was a seminar there, a Protestant seminar. So they were training Protestant pastors and so forth there. But on a specific day, for whatever reasons, there was suddenly an appearance of the Holy Madonna, the Matka Boska, as we say in Poland. And these professors of Protestant theology all saw this and converted, in fact, to Protestantism. So that's the point where we say Protestantism largely disappeared from national life, and the Poles returned en masse to Catholicism. I sometimes, in my publicist writing, talk about this large trajectory again as being from Lednica. That's where Mieszko was baptized, it seems, in 966, to Lednica. That is, today, every June, so in just a few weeks now, there's a huge Catholic youth ministry that happens on the lake shore where Mieszko was baptized. It's the largest such Catholic youth ministry in Europe, and maybe by that same token in the world.
And you said, and that's still happening today. So those history ages connect us to today's after 1,060 years. Yeah. Looking also at the modern, I mean, with the Church's role, how do you interpret? Also, we have, for instance, for some people in Poland, this will always be something important. If we look at identity, that's tied to that. For some people, they see that as the Church having too much influence in politics. One of those figures, Cardinal Ryś, I think, is someone that has been, to some people, divisive, to some, someone that they follow. But do you see a change there with him, what's going on right now? How do you see his role, or rather also the Church's role in politics in Poland?
Yeah, Cardinal Ryś is an outstanding scholar of the Middle Ages as well, and has had a lot to say about that period. Just a couple of weeks ago, he was the primary author of a letter that was read obligatorily in all Polish parishes, and it had to do with the relationship of the Lud Boży, as we say in Polish, the people of the covenant, to the Jews, also a people of the covenant. And he quoted not only documents from the Second Vatican Council, but from Pope Francis, who restated what had been said in 1965 even stronger. But he also quoted Pope John Paul II, whose voice resonates here more so than any other pope, of course, in that modern Israel has something to do with the divine working in history. So here, to a certain degree, that letter that was read in all the churches, drafted primarily by Cardinal Ryś, started to reach toward Christian Zionism, that phenomenon we know among Christian evangelicals, especially in the United States. And so there was a strong backlash in various quarters to that letter.
I mean, a lot to condense in one thing, but I just want to get your sense. Obviously, you mentioned John Paul II, Polish Pope, very much still in the hearts of many Poles at the moment. But now looking at the current Pope, how do you sense that, let's say, is there a proximity? How do Poles and Catholics view him? I mean, some might say that he has more similarities to John Paul II. And how do you interpret also this very public spat that's happened between the White House and the Vatican?
Yeah, I don't know very well just what are the general opinions of Poles towards Pope Leo. He seems to be kind of an absent figure in the discourse that I'm aware of, as far as that goes. But about Trump, who, of course, is inimitably disrespectful toward anyone who disagrees with him, his lack of deference towards the Pope was shocking. And in the leading Polish daily newspaper, Rzeczpospolita, I saw that roughly 80% of Poles are outraged at Trump's words to the Pope. So, yeah, I'm sure that also connects with their easy to understand affinity toward Catholicism generally, that even the Trumpists we have here in Poland are now likely to question their appreciation of President Trump.
Right. So from the modern all the way back to that baptism of Poland, really interesting stuff. Thanks so much for coming and sharing.
Thanks for having me.
Our guest here, Philip Earl Steele, a researcher in early medieval Polish history. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks, but stay right here on TVP World for more. Goodbye.